The battlefield of Ardent 7 was nothing but rust and bones. A graveyard of warships, some shattered, some still half-buried in the irradiated wastelands. The planet had once been the final stand of the human-Talvar war, a war humanity had lost. For the Talvar Dominion, Ardent 7 was a monument to their victory. For humanity, it was a graveyard. At least that's what the galaxy believed. And yet, beneath the jagged hulls of derelict cruisers and shattered dreadnoughts, deep in the tunnels where only ghosts should remain, humanity was still there. Not broken. Not defeated. Waiting. The Ghost Fleet awakens. Commander Elias Rourke stood on the rusting deck of the Vindicator, a once mighty Terran warship, now a skeleton of its former self. Its armor was scarred, its weapons long stripped away. By all rights the ship should have been dead. But today it stirred. "Commander, you're going to want to see this." The voice came from Lieutenant Nadia Hayes, her hazel eyes burning with barely contained excitement. She held a tablet in her oil-stained hands, the cracked screen displaying something impossible. Rourke took the device, scanning the data. His jaw tightened. They had done it. 4 years, the last remnants of humanity had been hidden beneath the wreckage of their lost fleet, scavenging, surviving. The Talvar had left the battlefield untouched, considering the ruined ship's useless scraps. They had underestimated humanity. Piece by piece, wire by wire, bolt by bolt, they had rebuilt. Now, after years of silence, the first ship was ready. The Vindicator's core hummed with life, its failing engines patched together with salvaged parts from 100 different vessels. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't clean. But it was functional. Rourke looked up, his hands clenching into fists. The Talvar thought they had won. They had left the battlefield thinking humanity was gone. But humanity had never been gone. They had just been waiting for their moment. And now it was here. The unstoppable plan. Deep in the underground network beneath the wreckage of Ardent 7, hundreds of survivors had gathered. They were engineers, pilots, soldiers, the last of humanity's warriors. They had no government. They had no homeworld. They had no resources. What they had was rage. And something far more dangerous. A plan. Rourke stepped onto the platform in the dimly lit war room, his voice carrying across the chamber. "For years they called us dead," he said. He let the words sink in, scanning the crowd. "They left our bodies to rot, our ships to rust. They took our home, burned our worlds, and thought that was the end." He paused. "They forgot who we are." A murmur rippled through the survivors. Rourke's eyes burned. "They think we're ghosts. Well, I say let's be ghosts." He lifted a remote. With the press of a button, a holographic projection of Ardent 7's orbit flickered to life. Dominion supply lines. Fuel depots. Weapons transports. The Talvar don't guard this place. Why would they? Rourke said. It's just a graveyard to them. A slow, dangerous grin spread across his face. But soon it won't be. Soon they'll understand what happens when you leave an enemy alive. He clenched his fist. We have ships. We have weapons. We have nothing to lose. He stepped forward. And that makes us the most dangerous force in the galaxy. The war room erupted in cheers. It was time. Time to rise. Time to take back what was stolen. Time to show the Talvar what happened when humanity refused to die. The first strike. The Dominion fuel transport Caliph cruised lazily through Ardent 7's orbit, its escort fleet practically non-existent. Why bother? Humanity was dead. There were no enemies here. Only wreckage. Which was why the first explosion took them completely by surprise. One moment, the Caliph's crew was exchanging idle chatter. The next, the ship's main reactor exploded in a violent cascade of fire and metal. The remaining Talvar vessels panicked, their communications channels flooded with confused, desperate chatter. And then, a ship emerged from the graveyard. A ghost from the past. The Vindicator. It shouldn't have been flying. It shouldn't have existed. And yet, it cut through the wreckage of dead ships, its cobbled-together thrusters burning blue, its weapon systems, restored, repaired, reborn, unleashing a hellstorm of fire. The Talvar panicked. Impossible. One of their captains screamed over the comms. That ship was destroyed. They were right. It had been destroyed. But humans were very good at rebuilding things. And they were even better at making you regret leaving them alive. The second ship emerged from the wreckage, a rebuilt Talvar cruiser, its hull still bearing the scars of past battles. The third came next. Then the fourth. More and more ships crawled out of the graveyard, their once broken frames restored by scavenged parts and desperate hands. The Ghost Fleet had risen. And they were here for vengeance. The first warship falls. The Talvar escort fleet tried to respond, but they were outmatched before the battle had even begun. The humans didn't fight fair. They didn't fight for honor. They fought to erase the ones who had tried to erase them. EMP strikes crippled the Dominion fleet. Scavenged plasma cannons tore through their shields. Boarding pods, made from the hulls of ancient wreckage, latched onto enemy warships, spilling human commandos into the corridors. And then, the first Dominion warship fell. The Caliph was torn apart, its broken frame drifting into the wreckage of a battlefield that had once been a graveyard. Now, it was humanity's weapon. The impossible message. Deep within Talvar High Command, a single distress signal cut through the galactic void. It came from Ardent 7. And it bore one message. A transmission from the dead. A human face flickered onto the Dominion's war room display. Commander Rourke's expression was calm, steady, merciless. His words sent a chill through every Talvar officer in the room. We were forgotten. Pause. Now we are remembered. The signal cut out. The war had begun. And this time, humanity would not stop until the Dominion was nothing but rust and bones. The galaxy had made a fatal mistake. They left humanity behind. And now, humanity was coming back. Panic spread through the Talvar Dominion like wildfire. For decades, Ardent 7 had been nothing but a junkyard, a silent monument to humanity's defeat. Now, it was the center of the impossible. The Talvar's own communications confirmed it. Ships they had destroyed years ago were rising from the dead. The Ghost Fleet was real. And it had just declared war. The Dominion's desperate response. The Talvar High Command was in chaos. Who is responsible for this failure? Snarled Grand Marshal Zorvex, his emerald scales flaring in agitation as he loomed over the central war table. The holographic display showed a fleet that should not exist. Patched-together warships, held together by scavenged technology, now tearing through Dominion supply lines. Humanity was supposed to be eradicated. Zorvex bellowed. And yet, here they are, striking from our own war graves. Admiral Selvas, one of the few commanders who had survived the first skirmish, stood rigidly at attention, her mandibles twitching. They are using our arrogance against us, she admitted. We assumed their ships were wreckage. We left them untouched. And now they are cutting through our forces like we are the ones who are ghosts. Zorvex's claws curled into fists. Then we erase them again. Selvas hesitated. There is a problem, sir. Zorvex turned on her. What problem? Selvas pointed at the holographic map, her voice tight. They aren't attacking like a conventional force. They're striking supply lines, refueling stations, critical infrastructure. She swallowed. They aren't fighting to win battles. Her eyes darkened. They're fighting to break us. Humanity's Shadow War. Commander Elias Rourke stood on the bridge of the Vindicator, watching another Dominion warship burn in the void. The Ghost Fleet had struck again, this time at Outpost Drankoth, a Talvar military outpost responsible for weapons manufacturing. It had been reduced to scrap metal. Another strike completed, Lieutenant Nadia Hayes reported, wiping sweat and grime from her face. Their supply chains are crumbling. Rourke nodded, arms crossed. They weren't here to fight fair. They weren't here to capture territory. They were here to starve the beast. The Talvar had ruled through power and fear. But now they were the ones afraid. They weren't losing soldiers. They were losing their ability to wage war at all. And soon their empire would begin to fracture. The trap is set. But the Talvar were not fools. Despite their arrogance, they learned fast. Selvas, the only admiral who had survived the first attack, had been studying human tactics. She had noticed something consistent. The Ghost Fleet never attacked defended targets. They struck from the shadows, avoiding major battles and targeting weakened outposts. So she decided to use that against them. A trap was set at Station Veltoric, a baited fuel depot left seemingly vulnerable. Dominion warships lay in wait, their stealth systems engaged, weapons primed. And when the Ghost Fleet arrived, they were ready. The Battle of Veltoric. The Vindicator and two other Ghost Fleet warships emerged from the asteroid field, moving in carefully coordinated attack formation. Rourke's team had done this a dozen times before. Disrupt comms. Destroy the station. Disappear before reinforcements could arrive. But the moment they entered range, Dominion warships decloaked. It. Heavily armed. Fully operational. Lieutenant Hayes' breath caught. It's a trap. Rourke's heart pounded. Evasive maneuvers. All ships, scatter. But the Dominion fleet was already moving. They cut off every escape route, their plasma cannons opening fire with brutal precision. The Ghost Fleet had been the hunters. Now they were the hunted. Survival against the odds. The Vindicator took a direct hit to the aft engines, alarms blaring as the ship shuddered violently. Hull integrity failing. An engineer shouted. Rourke gritted his teeth. They were outnumbered, outgunned. And yet, humanity had never won wars through strength alone. They had won through survival. Divert all power to the forward thrusters, Rourke ordered. Lieutenant Hayes' eyes widened. Sir, that will do it. The moment power shifted, the Vindicator lurched forward, directly toward the Dominion flagship. The Talvar admiral aboard the enemy warship hesitated. They were expecting retreat. Not a charge. Not suicide. And that half-second of hesitation was all humanity needed. The impossible escape. At the last moment, the Ghost Fleet's second warship, the Dauntless, detonated its reactor. A controlled explosion. One that sent a massive EMP wave surging through the battlefield. The Dominion's targeting systems blinked offline. Just for a moment. But a moment was enough. The Vindicator blasted through the wreckage, its thrusters overheating as it broke free of the Dominion's grasp. Other surviving Ghost Fleet vessels followed. They had escaped. But not without loss. The Dauntless was gone. Hundreds of survivors, dead. And now the Talvar knew where to find them. The war had changed. Rourke sat in the darkened war room of the Vindicator, his expression grim as he stared at the holographic display. They knew we were coming, Hayes said softly. Rourke exhaled. They learned. The Ghost Fleet's secrecy was compromised. The Talvar wouldn't underestimate them again. That meant one thing. The final battle was coming. And humanity would either win it, or be wiped from the stars forever. On the horizon, the storm gathered. The Ghost Fleet was bleeding. The Battle of Veltoric had changed everything. The Talvar were no longer arrogant. No longer dismissing humanity as a minor annoyance. Now they were hunting them down. Dominion warships patrolled the Ardent 7 graveyard, forcing the Ghost Fleet deeper into hiding. Surviving humans scrambled to repair their ships, but time was running out. Fuel was scarce. Weapons were limited. And worst of all, the Talvar were bringing their full fleet. Not just a patrol squad. Not just an escort wing. The entire Dominion armada. Humanity's final battle was coming. And this time there was no escape. The unseen war machine. Deep in the wreckage of Ardent 7, hidden beneath layers of ruined warships, lay something no one had seen in decades. A ship. A massive ship. The USS Juggernaut. A Terran Dreadnought-class warship, one of the last built before the war ended. It had never launched. Its frame was unfinished, its systems never activated. To the Talvar it was just another relic. But to the survivors of the Ghost Fleet? It was their last hope. Commander Elias Rourke stood on its half-functioning bridge, staring at the towering bulkheads. "Can we get it operational?" he asked. Chief Engineer Lena Vasquez, sweat-streaked and covered in grease, shook her head. "Sir, this thing is a dead hulk. We don't have the power cores, the main guns are missing, and the engine." "We don't need everything," Rourke interrupted. Lena frowned. "What do you mean?" Rourke turned, looking at the damaged remains of the fleet outside. "We're not trying to win a war," he said. His eyes burned with determination. "We're trying to make sure they never forget this battle." The final strategy. The Ghost Fleet had only a handful of ships left. But they still had one advantage. They knew the battlefield. They had spent years salvaging the wreckage, mapping out every ruined warship, every collapsed station. And now, they were going to turn the graveyard into a weapon. The plan was simple. Lure the Dominion into the debris field. Bait them toward the Juggernaut. Trigger the biggest chain reaction in history. And when the dust settled, make sure humanity's ghost would haunt the Talvar forever. The trap is set. The Talvar armada arrived like a storm. Hundreds of warships descended upon Ardent 7, their cannons armed, their commanders eager to crush the last remnants of humanity. Grand Marshal Zorvex stood aboard his flagship, watching the wreckage. "This ends today," he growled. Admiral Selvas stood beside him, her mandibles twitching. "They will not go quietly," Zorvex sneered. "Let them scream." With a single command, the Dominion fleet advanced. Straight into the Ghost Fleet's trap. The graveyard awakens. The first explosions took them by surprise. Hidden charges detonated beneath wreckage, sending twisted starship hulls hurling into the Dominion formation. Ships collided, shields flaring, hulls cracking under the sudden assault. Then, the Ghost Fleet struck. The Vindicator emerged from the debris, plasma cannons firing at point-blank range. Boarding pods latched onto Talvar cruisers, human soldiers storming enemy ships in brutal close-quarters combat. It was not a battle. It was an ambush. And in the center of it all, the Juggernaut's engines roared to life. The immortal ship rises. The Dominion fleet panicked as the USS Juggernaut, a ship they thought long dead, came online. Grand Marshal Zorvex staggered back in shock. Impossible. Admiral Selvas's mandibles twitched. They rebuilt it? Zorvex's voice rose in fury. All ships. Destroy that dreadnought. A dozen Dominion warships turned their cannons toward the Juggernaut. But it was too late. The massive warship wasn't built to win battles. It was built to end them. The final explosion. Rourke stood on the Juggernaut's command deck, watching the Dominion fleet fall into position. He turned to Lena Vasquez. Is the core ready? She swallowed hard. Yeah. But once we do this. I know. Rourke took a deep breath. Then, over the open comms, he spoke the last words of the Ghost Fleet. You tried to erase us. Pause. Now we erase you. The Juggernaut's overloaded core detonated. The blast wave consumed the Dominion fleet, igniting the entire debris field into a firestorm of plasma, radiation, and destruction. Hundreds of warships vanished in an instant. The battlefield of Ardent 7, once a symbol of humanity's defeat, became the Dominion's grave. The survivors. Not all humans died in the blast. The Vindicator and a handful of ships escaped into the void, disappearing into deep space. The Talvar Dominion was shattered. Their armada was gone. Their fear had only just begun. The message that echoed forever. A year later, the Talvar received a transmission. A simple video file. It showed the wreckage of Ardent 7 still burning. And then, a message. A voice they thought had died. Commander Elias Rourke. His words were etched into history. You can kill us. You can burn our worlds. You can call us dead. But you can't stop us. Because even in death, humanity rises. The Battle of Ardent 7 was supposed to be the end of humanity. Instead, it became the beginning of the Dominion's downfall. The Talvar Armada had been erased. Hundreds of warships reduced to nothing but drifting wreckage, their commanders vaporized in the greatest detonation the sector had ever seen. And yet, the Ghost Fleet had escaped. Humanity was supposed to be a memory. Now they were a legend. The galaxy reacts. The destruction of the Talvar Armada sent shockwaves across the galaxy. The once mighty Dominion was left scrambling, its military hierarchy shattered, its fleets crippled beyond repair. The great invincible empire had lost an entire war fleet to an enemy they had believed extinct. Worse, it wasn't just a loss. It was a humiliation. Their enemies, the Unified Confederacy, the Zeltai clans, even the passive Veil Republic, all saw the same thing. The Talvar could be beaten. And the ones who had done it were supposed to be gone. The galaxy watched as the Dominion struggled to recover. And deep in the void, the Ghost Fleet was still out there, waiting. Survivors in the dark. Aboard the Vindicator, Commander Elias Rourke stared out at the passing stars. Only a fraction of their fleet had survived. The Juggernaut was gone. Ardent 7 was a crater of burning wreckage. But the Talvar would never forget them. Lieutenant Nadia Hayes stood beside him, her expression unreadable. We should be dead, she muttered. Rourke nodded. But we're not. He turned to his crew, what was left of them. We have no home, he said. No nation. No government. He clenched his fists. But we have something better. Hayes met his gaze. A cause? Rourke's voice was calm. Steady. Absolute. The Dominion isn't finished. But neither are we. He took a slow breath. We don't need to win the war in a single battle. We just need to make sure they never sleep soundly again. A slow, knowing grin spread across Hayes' face. You're saying we become something else? Rourke turned back to the stars. No. I'm saying we become what they fear the most. Pause. Then. We become the storm that never fades. The Vindicator's engines roared to life, burning through the void. Somewhere across the galaxy the Talvar Dominion still reigned. But now they knew. Humanity had not fallen. It had become the nightmare that would haunt them forever. The new war begins. Years later, in the deepest chambers of the Talvar War Council, whispers spread. Entire supply convoys had vanished, ambushed in the dark. Dominion outposts had gone silent, their forces never heard from again. Ghost ships had been sighted across the sector, their hulls patched and scarred, their weapons deadly and precise. No distress signals. No survivors. Only destruction. And always after every attack, A single message left behind. Not a threat. Not a declaration. Just a reminder. We are still here. And with those 4 words, the mighty Talvar knew true fear. Because the dead had refused to stay buried. And humanity? Humanity was never going to stop. Final transmission, the Ghost Fleet lives. A transmission intercepted in Talvar High Command, decrypted 3 years after the fall of Ardent 7. Source unknown. Location untraceable. Contents. You thought we were gone. You thought Ardent 7 was the end. You were wrong. We are the wreckage that never rusts. The fire that never dies. The ghosts that haunt your every step. You left us for dead. Now we are death itself. The war never ended. And it never would.